Hey guys, Dislitter Magic here, and it's time for more MTG mistakes. This one's a bit more rare as far as how often it comes up in actual gameplay, but it depends on your type of deck, and now that you know how this works, you might build a deck around this, probably in Modern. But there is at least one card in Standard right now that does this, so I might as well talk about it, probably because it's one of my favorite spells of all time, too. I'm talking, of course, about spell cloning. Everybody loves a good spell cloning because, you know, it just feels stupid to take a spell, take it out of your hand, cast it. Hey, it's an amazing spell, it did what it did, but now it's gone. Don't you wish you had another copy of it? Ta-da, spell cloning. And obviously it worked pretty well in my Beholder Alpha deck if you haven't seen it. That deck is a disgrace. As is this card that I'm going to use as an example. Isochron Scepter. There are two major ways that are commonly used to clone spells, and the first one is imprint. So let's talk about that one first, because obviously that's what Isochron uses. So when Isochron enters the battlefield, you can choose a spell, or one that's in your hand at least, has to have a converted mana cost of 2 or less, who cares, whatever. It gets exiled, and then whenever you use the ability, you pay to tap it, you may copy the exiled card, so basically copy the spell. Now, of course, they say card because this is what I commonly refer to as card-based spell copying, and then, of course, the inverse is stack-based spell copying. So basically, with this particular version of imprint, which there are other ways to copy cards, you know, you just pay to, tap it, and then you put it on the stack as a spell as if you cast the card. Now the catch is, since this way is so unbelievably flexible, it can split between turns. You could do it a virtually endless number of times, as you've seen in my tap dance deck. Totally just realized this card is in 2 of my major Modern decks. It's so powerful, so the ruling is that if there is a second or third cost to the spell, you have to pay it as well. Which is really weird because that's not normally how spell cloning works. So of course in my Beholder Alpha deck I'm cloning Deprive most of the time, and it says, word for word, as an additional cost to cast Deprive, return a land you control to its owner's hand, and then counter target spell for 2, making it totally awesome, but I wish they would reprint counter spell. So when you clone a spell like that, you have to pay the additional cost. So if it says, you know, sacrifice a creature, you have to do that. So imprinting is what I usually use to clone spells, at least reliably and over the long term. Now, not all versions of imprint clone spells. Some of them do other stuff, like they'll imprint a card and then its mana cost is used to deal damage or something like that. Now, the other way is instead of casting a spell as a card, like a card sitting in exile, you clone it while it's on the stack by pretty much just casting it twice, or by cloning like an opponent's spell. And of course, the one that comes to mind is the M11, M12, M13 staple, Reverberate. I love that card. It doesn't matter who controls the spell, it doesn't matter whether it's targeted or not, you just straight up clone the spell. In fact, it just says, copy target instant sorcery spell, you may choose new targets for the copy. So by target, they mean any spell currently on the stack. Now the rulings get a little bit more generous with this type of cloning because it's very situational and you have to sort of pay like around double the mana to, you know, cast a spell of your own and then clone it with this card. Now with imprinting, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but if a spell is like Crater's Claws, you know, it has an X in the cost, X is 0 and you're not allowed to pay for it. So you're cloning the card just from scratch, not while it's on the stack and while it has certain traits. So you just automatically zero out all X's. The exact opposite is true with cloning it on the stack. The actual ruling says if the spell that's copied has an X whose value was determined as it was cast, the copy has the same value as X. So if you max out like a, you know, some kind of fireball spell or life drain or whatever, you know, classic X spell, you get 2 copies of it fully powered up. The copy has the exact same value, which is fantastic. I mean, there's just, I mean, like I said, Crater's Claws. I mean, that's a great example. People were using goggles to clone them. Now you're probably thinking, oh man, imprinting is crap then. Let's just clone everything on the stack. Well, there's an advantage to imprinting something to clone it from exile. Let's say it's Dromoka's Command and it has 4 different modes. It's a modal spell, as they call it. It says choose 2, and then you have 4 options. If you're casting it like from scratch with imprint, and that's the type of cloning, it's like card-based cloning instead of stack-based cloning is how I usually refer to it, then you get to pick whatever 2 modes you want every single time. If you clone it on the stack, though, you're stuck with whatever was already chosen at the time it was cast. So if your opponent says, oh, Dramoka's command, put a 1/1 counter on target creature, and target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Well, that's exactly the two modes that you would be doing when you clone the spell, because you're cloning it exactly as is. Now that reminds me of the second really important thing, and all of these people get wrong constantly, so hopefully you're like taking notes or something. Mental notes would be great. You aren't allowed when you clone a spell on the stack to pay any additional costs for the copy, but, you know, they're mostly referring to optional costs. Any effect that goes off on the spell that's based on additional costs that were paid for the original spell are copied as though they did occur. So if it says, you know, pay 2 mana, that's the cost, and then it says, as an additional cost, you may blow up X mountains or something, or just for every mountain you sacrifice, you deal 3 damage to the opponent or something like that. However, the first spell went off, let's say they nuke 3 of their mountains and now they're dealing 9 damage to the player or something. That's exactly how you clone it. You can't increase it by sacking more mountains because the spell is already on the stack, it's already been paid for. That's with spell cloning. But then with imprint, it's mandatory that you pay any additional costs, and then any optional costs, I'm pretty sure you're allowed to pay, because there's no ruling saying you can't. I mean, they're optional costs for a reason. Now, the specific example that they give in the ruling, I should probably mention this, is the spell Fling, which my friend has a Fling deck. It's really annoying. I hate it so much. If a player sacrifices a 3/3 creature to Fling, and you copy it with Reverberate, the copy of Fling will also deal 3 damage to its target. So it's not only like, was the additional cost paid, it's how was it paid, what's the value of how it was paid. So basically, I mean, the overall theme, as you're probably noticing, is just copy everything. However the spell went on the stack, that's exactly how you copy it. So X is preserved, costs are preserved, options are preserved, the modes are preserved, all of that. And then with imprint, you're casting it from scratch every time, so anything optional you can choose, anything X is automatically 0, and all the additional costs you have to pay every single time. Now there's one last thing that I saved for last on purpose because it's the number one thing that people get wrong all the time. When you clone a spell on the stack, you're not casting it, you're copying it. You're just creating a copy of the spell. So if you have a creature with prowess that says, hey, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, then, you know, +1/+1 or whatever, that's not going to trigger it because you're just cloning it. You're not casting it from scratch. Now, when you imprint a spell and clone it that way, like clone it card-wise, you are considered to be casting a spell. And that's super important because, I mean, Storm, Prowess, you could probably name a dozen other effects that say whenever you cast a spell. Or the first time you cast a spell, cancel it. Or the second time you cast a spell on a given turn, draw a card. I mean, those types of things have been printed forever. So that's definitely the one that I see people screw up. You know, they always ask a judge, if I imprint this and clone it with Isochron, is it considered to be cast? And then if I clone it, am I casting it, or what am I doing? And of course they're asking because it's not printed on the card, it's just in the rulings, so how would you know unless you read them? Or if you watch Desolator Magic's amazing videos on his amazing channel, then you would also know. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go take a whole fistful of allergy pills, because as you can probably notice, the mold and pollen and everything's off the charts and I can barely breathe today. Also, fun bonus tip, because I've been sneaking in these bonus tips at the end there. You probably caught that I said, you know, Pyromancer's Goggles is the primary way that people are cloning spells right now. That was from Origins. There's another one, there's a second one. Like I said, I knew there was one, I thought there was two, there actually is. It's, of course, Psychic Rebuttal, or as I like to call it, Almost Redirect. So for 2 mana, not even double blue, I mean, can you believe that? Counter target instant or sorcery spell that targets you, so that's the limitation. Spell Mastery. If there are 2 or more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, you may copy the spell countered this way. You may choose new targets for the copy. And of course, since this is like still considered to be on the stack cloning, even though you're countering it and then cloning it, it's got the same X, same mode, same everything, you know. It's stack cloning. I totally just explained it. And by the way, it's time for, oh yes, a bonus tip. That's right, we're going so deep into bonus inception, you might have to put a seatbelt on. The bonus tip is if you're going to take Benadryl for your allergies, and you take it at night because it's going to make you fall asleep anyway, don't mix it with an entire bag of pork rinds. I heard an urban legend, so I thought, that pork, or specifically pork rinds, have some kind of mild hallucinogen that messes with like your delta waves or something while you're dreaming, and it makes you have really tripped out dreamings and do weird crap? Yeah. Yeah, it does. And if you mix it with Benadryl, it gets twice as bad. So for some reason, I thought, this was something to do. Get up at like 4 a.m. and, thought my dresser was attacking me. Because, it's just standing there menacingly. And so I punched my dresser really, really hard. And I'm a pretty good kickboxer. So when I punch something, you're talking, 500, 600, 700 pounds of force or whatever. It's a lot. And that dresser is approximately twice as old as I am. Got it from my mom. So I messed up my hand a little bit. I think there's still some blood on the dresser, actually, that I was too lazy to clean off at like 4 a.m. And then I was immediately like, why did I do that? Like, that was weird. And so then I went to the bathroom, took piss, and I was like, okay, I'm going back to bed. And then for some reason, I thought it was like something to do, like totally logical, made perfect sense at the time, to just like go to sleep on the floor. I was just like, oh man, that carpet looks so soft. I'm going to sleep on the floor. And then I woke up on the floor in the morning and my back didn't feel so good. So don't clone your spells incorrectly. Don't, fail to preserve X, and don't take Benadryl, trip on pork rinds, and then attack your dresser and fall asleep on your floor. Oh, and don't make YouTube videos when you're on Benadryl, because holy crap did number 11 suck. But number 13 is coming soon. So definitely hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next video.